Stop. What is happening around you is not falling apart, it is falling away, and the Arcturian High Council has already identified exactly why. This transmission was not placed in your path by chance. Your field drew it in because a sequence is already active, and the process you are living through right now, the incompatibility, the stillness, the strange inability to engage with what used to matter, has already been mapped, diagnosed, and recognized by Arcturian intelligence. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what is happening to you now, why your field has shifted, and what the Arcturians already know about this phase. But here is the first revelation. What you have been experiencing as collapse, disconnection, and inexplicable withdrawal from people, places, and patterns that once held meaning is not breakdown. It is the outer symptom of an invisible structural change that has already occurred at the perimeter of your field. The confusion is not a warning, it is confirmation. The algorithm only delivered this. It did not create the timing. Something in your field requested recognition at exactly this moment, and that request has been answered. What is being revealed tonight is precise. The Arcturian High Council has identified a specific field structure, the outermost layer of your energetic perimeter, that has been quietly destabilizing for months, not collapsing, recalibrating. And tonight, that recalibration has reached completion. The timelines that used to pull you sideways, the patterns that used to compel you, the static that used to feel like signal, they are no longer compatible with the frequency your field now holds. You will feel this not as dramatic revelation, but as an unusual stillness, as silence where noise used to live, as an absence of pull toward what no longer belongs to you. This is not confusion. This is the first evidence of a field that has already changed. Like this transmission, if you can feel that something invisible has already shifted, comment 111 if you know this message reached you at the exact right moment. Comment 777 if you feel your field is already being repositioned. Comment I am the Ignile if the activation has already begun in your body before this video even ends. Share this with someone who feels that reality has quietly changed but cannot find the words to explain why. You are guided here because the signal is already active. And now we go deeper, because recognition without understanding is only the beginning of the process, and what is happening in your field right now requires more than a moment of resonance. It requires a precise map of the mechanism, not a general orientation, not a vague reassurance that things will improve. A map with identifiable terrain, readable stages, and the kind of diagnostic clarity that transforms confusion from a source of fear into a source of information. And that map begins here. What you have been calling instability is not instability. It is incompatibility made visible. There is a critical difference between those two things, and that difference is the entire foundation of what this transmission is about to reveal. Instability implies that something has gone wrong, that a system that was functioning correctly has begun to malfunction. Incompatibility means something entirely different. It means that something has gone right, and so completely that the life structure built for a previous version of your field can no longer hold the architecture of what you are becoming. The walls are not crumbling because you are weak. They are crumbling because they were never designed to contain this frequency. They were engineered to specifications that no longer describe you, and a structure that cannot contain what it was built to hold will always begin to show fractures first at its outer edges, in the relationships that feel suddenly hollow, in the ambitions that feel suddenly meaningless, in the routines that once provided comfort and now provide only a strange, persistent reminder that something essential is missing from the interior of your own experience. This is not depression. This is not burnout. This is not a signal that you are moving in the wrong direction. This is what the Arcturian High Council identifies as perimeter dissolution. the outer shell of an energetic architecture, losing its coherence because the interior frequency has already exceeded the vibrational ceiling of the old structure. Think of it this way. A vessel built to hold a specific volume will hold that volume perfectly until what it contains begins to expand beyond its designed capacity. The vessel does not fail. The contents have simply grown past the boundary of what the vessel was constructed to accommodate, and the fractures appear at the perimeter, at the outermost membrane, because that is where the pressure differential between interior and exterior becomes most acute. The outside collapses last. It always collapses last, which means that by the time you can see the outer signs, the withdrawal, the disconnection, the strange neutrality toward things that used to carry emotional charge, the interior shift has already been complete for some time. You are not watching the beginning of something. You are watching the delayed external evidence of something that already happened deep inside your field, months, and in some cases years, before this moment. This is the first thing the Arcturians would have you understand. The confusion you feel now is not a symptom of the shift beginning. It is a symptom of the shift completing. You are not at the entrance of the process. You are at the threshold of its visible confirmation. That distinction is not small. That distinction is the difference between interpreting your current experience as collapse and recognizing it accurately as the final visible stage of an already completed interior correction. Let that settle for a moment, because the mind will want to argue with it. The mind has been trained to read disorder as evidence of error, and it will resist. The resistance of the mind does not change the mechanics of what the field has already done. The sleep disruptions are not anxiety. The mental fragmentation is not weakness. The sudden, unexplainable heaviness in your body, the kind that arrives without cause and settles without invitation, the weight that is not fatigue but is something heavier than fatigue, something that presses from the inside rather than accumulating from the outside, is not illness. These are the physical and cognitive residue of a field that is actively releasing the energetic debris of a life configuration it has already outgrown. When a structure collapses, it does not disappear cleanly. It leaves material, dust, particles of the old frame embedded in the surfaces of what remains, the weight of what was there before the clearing began. What you are carrying in your body, in your mind, in the strange, unfamiliar silence behind your eyes, is the residue of a life pattern that your field has already rejected, but that your conscious mind is still attempting to interpret, salvage, and explain. The field has moved. The mind is still standing in the rubble of the old location, trying to rebuild something the field has already vacated. You have been trying to fix something that was never broken. You have been trying to restore something that was never failing. You have been trying to understand a silence that is not absence. It is clarity before it learns how to speak. And the harder you have worked to reconstruct coherence inside a structure the field has already abandoned, the more disorienting the gap between effort and result has felt, because you cannot restore alignment between a structure and a field that have separated at the frequency level. The structure belongs to a previous version of the signal, and the signal has already moved on. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field stops denying what has already begun. If this transmission put language around something you have been carrying in silence, Arcturian protocol, the recalibration blueprint, was created for this exact stage. It is not another explanation. It is the guided blueprint for those whose field has already entered correction and can no longer return to the old line unchanged. It shows you how to recognize the phases, stabilize the shift, and move through the recalibration without mistaking it for collapse. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. Now we move into what the Arcturian High Council has specifically mapped about this phase, because the process you are inside has distinct stages, and each stage carries its own signature, its own set of recognizable symptoms that look like one thing to the uninformed mind and reveal something entirely different when read through the correct interpretive field. What follows is not a general description of spiritual awakening. It is a precise diagnostic sequence. Read it as such. The first stage is what the Arcturians call signal drift. This is where it begins, not with dramatic rupture, not with sudden loss, not with a clearly identifiable event that marks the moment everything changed. It begins with a quiet and persistent sense that your internal compass has stopped pointing in any clear direction. You wake up, and the things that used to motivate you feel distant. Not wrong, exactly, just unreachable. Like trying to tune into a frequency you know was broadcasting yesterday, but is now producing only static. You look at the path you were on and feel something that is not quite resistance, not quite boredom, not quite grief, something closer to the sensation of standing in front of a door you know you are not supposed to open anymore, without yet being able to see what door you are supposed to open instead. The future that was concrete becomes abstract. The goals that were urgent become optional. The drive that organized your daily movement slows, not from fatigue, but from a kind of directional uncertainty that no amount of motivation can resolve. Because motivation requires a signal to follow, and the signal has changed frequencies. Signal drift is not confusion created by your mind. It is the consequence of your field disengaging from a frequency it no longer recognizes as its own. The old signal, the one that used to organize your goals, your desires, your daily sense of direction, has gone quiet, not because it was wrong to follow it once, but because the frequency that carried it is no longer the frequency your field is operating on. You did not lose your way. Your way changed underneath you, quietly and completely, before you had language to describe what was happening. This is not failure. This is the first readable sign that the recalibration has already begun. The second stage arrives when the outer structures that were built to match the old signal begin to lose coherence. This is where the relationships shift, where the professional environment that used to feel aligned begins to feel constraining. Not because the environment changed, but because you are now operating at a different frequency than the one the environment was built around, where the social identity you spent years constructing begins to feel like a costume you no longer know how to wear convincingly. You say the right words in the right contexts, perform the expected version of yourself with practiced fluency, and still feel, beneath every interaction, an uncomfortable awareness that the person doing the performing is not entirely continuous with whoever is emerging from the interior of the field. The gap between the performed self and the repositioning self widens, and the wider it becomes, the more exhausting the performance feels. Not because you are doing it wrong, but because you are doing it from a frequency that no longer supports it. The Arcturian terminology for this stage is architectural incompatibility, the moment the external life structure and the internal field frequencies stop speaking the same language. And the important thing to understand here is that no one did anything wrong. The relationships did not become toxic. The career did not become meaningless. The people did not change. What changed is the frequency of your own field. And once a field changes its base frequency, everything that was calibrated to the previous frequency will automatically begin to feel misaligned, regardless of how healthy or valuable it may have been before. This is not a judgment of those things. This is field logic. An instrument tuned to one key cannot produce harmony with players tuned to a different key, regardless of how skilled everyone involved may be. The dissonance is not a sign of failure on either side. It is the audible evidence of a frequency differential that has simply become too large to harmonize across. Recalibration requires releasing structures that belong to a previous tuning, not because they were wrong, but because they are no longer the right instrument for the frequency now active in your field. What comes next is the stage most people misread most severely. After signal drift, after architectural incompatibility, there is a phase the Arcturians call the hollow interval. This is the period between the collapse of the old structure and the visible emergence of the new one. And it is, by far, the most difficult phase to navigate because it is the phase that looks most completely like failure. Everything from the previous configuration has either dissolved or is in visible dissolution. The relationships that belonged to the old frequency have pulled back or departed. The professional structure that matched the old signal has become constraining or has begun to fall away. The future that felt concrete has gone abstract, and the new configuration has not yet made itself legible. There is nothing to hold. There is no clear direction to move toward. There is only the strange, disorienting experience of standing in an open field after a structure you lived inside for years has been removed around you. The walls are gone. The roof is gone. The familiar constraints that used to tell you exactly where you were by defining what you could and could not do, gone. You are not homeless. You are exposed. And exposure, before the next structure rises, feels indistinguishable from loss. The Arcturian High Council specifically flags the hollow interval as the phase where most people abort the process, where they reach back for the old architecture because the absence of the new one feels unbearable, where they reconstruct as quickly as possible a version of what they just left, smaller, more rigid, more consciously controlled, because the openness of the interval feels like danger, a new relationship that mirrors the old one precisely, a return to the career path that had already begun to fail, a social re-engagement that reinstates the previous identity as a defense against the discomfort of the emerging one. And in doing so, they delay the completion of a correction that was already in motion. They do not cancel it. The field does not abandon the process simply because the mind resists. The recalibration does not reverse because the personality has become frightened and reached for familiar architecture. But the resistance introduces turbulence into what could have been a clean transition. And that turbulence, that friction between the field continuing to reposition and the mind insisting on reconstruction, is where the deepest suffering inside this process is generated. Not in the hollow interval itself, in the resistance to it. If you are in the hollow interval right now, if you are standing in the space where the old life no longer operates, and the new configuration has not yet become visible, then the most important thing this transmission can offer you is this: the absence of structure is not the absence of progress. The silence is not emptiness. What you are standing inside is not a void. It is a clearing, and clearings only feel dangerous because we were taught to read open space as something that needs to be filled immediately, rather than as the first evidence that a field has released what was incompatible and created room for what belongs to the next frequency. The clearing is not a problem to be solved. It is a stage to be passed through, and it can only be passed through by remaining inside it long enough for the new architecture to become readable. The fourth recognition in this sequence is what happens to the body and mind when a rare protocol becomes active. And this is where the language of ordinary mental health or even conventional spiritual frameworks begins to fail, because what Arcturian intelligence identifies as a rare protocol activation does not have a clean analog in any system that does not account for field-level change. A rare protocol is not a gradual adjustment. It is not a slow recalibration that allows the conscious mind to pace itself through the transition. A rare protocol is a sequence of corrections that proceeds through rapid, compressed realignment, activating at threshold, not at invitation. And the reason it is experienced as particularly destabilizing is precisely that it does not wait for the conscious mind to be ready. It does not schedule itself around convenient life circumstances. It activates when field conditions reach a specific threshold, and it proceeds according to its own internal logic, regardless of what is happening in the surrounding life at the time of its activation. The signs of rare protocol activation are distinct, They include a sudden intensification of the sense that time has changed quality, that weeks feel both accelerated and strangely prolonged simultaneously, as if the clock is moving at two incompatible speeds at once, and both readings are somehow accurate. An unexpected inability to care about outcomes that previously carried high emotional charge, not apathy exactly, but a kind of detachment that feels less like disengagement and more like the emotional investment simply failing to load, the way a page fails to render when the connection has already moved on. A persistent, low-frequency inner pressure that does not build toward anything specific, but does not fully release either. A hum beneath the surface of daily experience that is not pain, but is not comfort, that does not escalate into crisis, but does not resolve into peace. Hypersensitivity to environments, to other people's emotional states, to sounds and textures and atmospheric shifts that previously went unnoticed. The field, in active rare protocol, is reading everything at a higher resolution than it was previously calibrated to process, and the volume of incoming information before the new filters are fully established can be genuinely overwhelming. And perhaps most distinctively, the sensation that you are watching your own life from a slight distance, as if the identity you have been operating through no longer fully fits, and the new one has not yet fully arrived to take its place. You are between identities, between frequencies, between the person the old field produced and the person the repositioned field is in the process of establishing. These are not symptoms of breakdown. These are the recognizable signatures of a field under active rare protocol, a field being repositioned at a speed and depth that exceeds the usual pace of gradual recalibration, moving faster than the surrounding life can reorganize itself to reflect, which is precisely why the internal experience and the external circumstances feel so comprehensively out of phase with each other. The fifth recognition is perhaps the most counterintuitive. It concerns what the Arcturian High Council identifies as forced incompatibility, the mechanism by which people, circumstances, patterns, and life structures that belonged to the old frequency become actively unable to remain in your field, even when you want them to stay. This is not rejection. This is not failure of relationship. This is a phenomenon that operates entirely below the level of choice or conflict. The frequency differential between your repositioned field and the frequency those elements operate on has simply grown too large to sustain proximity. Like two radio towers broadcasting on frequencies too far apart to share a signal, the connection becomes impossible to maintain, not because of anything either party did wrong, but because the fundamental architecture of the transmission has changed on one side of the relay. What left your life, not by your conscious choice, not through conflict, not through any identifiable failure on your part or theirs, left because the frequency gap became uncrossable. They did not leave because you failed. They did not leave because you were abandoned. They left because your field became a frequency they could no longer coexist with at close range. And while this may feel, in the moment, like profound loss, and the grief is real, and it should not be minimized or reframed away too quickly, the Arcturian interpretation of forced incompatibility is precise. It is not loss. It is field hygiene. It is the automatic clearing of elements whose continued presence would have created interference in the new signal, degrading the quality of the recalibration and prolonging the transition unnecessarily. What you miss is real. What left may have been genuinely valuable, genuinely loved, genuinely important in the life the old frequency was building. But its departure was not a mistake. It was a correction the field initiated because it could not complete the repositioning without it. The field does not release what is compatible, only what is not. And what remains after the clearing is not what is left over, it is what belongs to the next frequency. Now we arrive at the sixth recognition, and this is the one that tends to produce the deepest quality of response in people who are genuinely inside this process. It concerns the specific, disorienting experience of the timeline rupture, the moment when the future you had been operating toward simply stops feeling like your future, not because something happened to destroy it, not because you made a different choice, not because you received new information that changed your assessment of whether it was worth pursuing, but because from one specific and often entirely unremarkable moment forward, the trajectory that had felt clear, structured, inevitable, and yours simply loses all felt reality. It is still technically possible. Nothing external has blocked it. The path is still open, but something inside you has disengaged from it so completely that pursuing it no longer feels like pursuing your life. It feels like performing someone else's life in a costume that was never yours to begin with. The motivation that used to organize your movement toward that future is not exhausted. It has not been redirected. It has simply gone offline, as if the future itself stopped broadcasting on a frequency your field can receive. Timeline rupture is one of the Arcturian High Council's most clearly mapped phenomena because it is one of the most universally misread. The majority of people experiencing it interpret it as giving up, as a failure of commitment or courage, as evidence that they are too weak, too frightened, or too distracted to continue toward what they wanted. And so they force themselves back onto a trajectory their field has already departed from, not through willpower driven by genuine motivation, not through discipline connected to authentic desire, but through fear of what the rupture might mean if they allow themselves to feel it fully. They mistake the rupture for a personal failing and treat the departure from the old timeline as something to be corrected rather than something to be understood. The Arcturian reading of timeline rupture is entirely different. A timeline rupture does not mean you have failed to build the future you were working toward. It means your field has already shifted to a new temporal line, a new trajectory, and the future you were pursuing belonged to the previous line. It existed in coherence with the previous frequency. The repositioned field operates on different coordinates, and those coordinates do not intersect with the old trajectory in any location that remains accessible from where your field now stands. The rupture is not the end of your forward movement. It is the moment the forward movement stops obeying the logic of the old line and begins operating according to the logic of the new one. The problem is not that the future has disappeared. The problem is that the new line has not yet made itself visible in the same detail that the old one had. And so the rupture feels like a loss of the future rather than what it actually is, a recalibration of which future is now genuinely yours. And here, near the end of what has been revealed, is what the Arcturian High Council would have you understand above all else. You have not been failing, you have been repositioning. The process you are inside did not begin when you noticed it. It began long before the outer symptoms became legible, long before the sleep changed, the relationships shifted, the old motivations quieted. The future began to feel like it belonged to someone else. The invisible work was already complete when the visible confusion began. The interior correction had already run its full depth before the surface showed a single fracture, which means that everything you have been experiencing as disorder, as disorientation, as the unsettling sense that you are becoming unrecognizable even to yourself, that entire experience is not the beginning of a crisis. It is the visible evidence of a correction that the field already completed at a depth you were not yet equipped to read. You were never behind. You were never off course. You were always inside a process the Arcturian High Council recognizes precisely, one that moves from the inside out, completes its deepest work in silence, and only becomes legible at the surface when the interior transformation is already done. The confusion was not a warning. It was a confirmation. The withdrawal was not abandonment. It was repositioning. The hollow interval was not emptiness. It was clearing. The timeline rupture was not failure. It was reorientation. The people and patterns and structures that left were not taken from you. They were released by a field that had already outgrown them, a field that could not move forward while carrying architecture calibrated to a frequency it had already left behind. You are not going insane. You are not being punished. You are not doing something wrong by feeling unable to return to a life configuration that no longer matches the frequency your field now holds. The inability to return is not weakness. It is precision. The field knows exactly what it has departed from, and it will not re-enter coherence with a frequency it has already processed and released. You are never collapsing. You are always being corrected. Speak this aloud if you can feel that it is true. What is changing in me is not random. I was not abandoned. I was repositioned. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Quantum. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion. And this is only the beginning.